start. Well, good afternoon. This is Kathleen Dudley coming from New Mexico, and I have the pleasure to be able to interview with REINETTE Senum. And REINETTE, welcome.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm really excited about this. And we were just mentioning, we've got a lot of friends, that we know, mutual friends. So I said the world's getting smaller and smaller all the time.
Well, it is. And it's encouraging because you have such a fine profile along with so many of these other folks. And that's what needs to happen, because the information, the education needs to get out there. And as long as people aren't given the options or aren't given the actual truth, the education of what's really happening, then they can't make quality decisions.
That's right.
And it's the quality decision that not only protects their family and themselves, but it protects the country, it protects the world. So when I found out, oh, go ahead.
No, I just say as elected official, I would work a lot with the public, which was not very popular with the other city council members. And I would try to educate them so that when we went to the mic during public comment, they were informed and they were very powerful. You couldn't pull the wool over their eyes. And then I could see the times when they weren't educated and they'd come to the mic confused and not following what was going on, and they just get slaughtered. And so, yeah, and people don't realize, by the way, Kathleen, it's actually the job of elected officials to keep their constituents informed. That's our job, not to keep them in the dark. It's our job to keep them informed and give them the information so they can make educated decisions and understand what's going on. Well,
and so few of them actually will take the purpose of their position to heart, because they often will twist it. And I do want to say that for those who do not know REINETTE Senum, most people know you, no doubt, but REINETTE was the city mayor.
That's right.
For Nevada City on 2 occasions, and it was not until 2020, I believe, when you withdrew from running for the 3rd term. Is that correct?
Well, I had actually won 3rd term. I was stepping down as mayor, ready to take oath for my council for the next 4 years. And instead I read my resignation letter, and I said to the city council and the supervisors that, you all have the information available that I have, and you're all committing crimes against humanity. And we're going to come back in a few years and hold your feet to the fire to the highest extent of the law. And ever since then, they really hate my guts.
Well,
but it's like you guys, all the suffering is on your shoulders. All the deaths, the illnesses, right? The destruction of businesses and families and lives and relationship and community networks is on their shoulders.
Yes. Yes, and it took a woman of honor, a woman of integrity, to hold that position, and then also hold their feet to the fire. And so I'm very grateful to you for continuing forward, and what you're doing today really pleased me in a very personal way, but also in a manner in which you're taking a lawsuit against the perpetrators for geoengineering. Now, many people know geoengineering, but many people don't, because they're focused on their cell phones and they're looking down all the time, and they're not looking up into the skies and seeing what is happening and has been happening for a very long time. And that's with all the chemtrails. That's with all the dimmies of the skies. Yes. So, REINETTE, would you please tell us what it is you are taking forward and how you're going about it, how you're building your group to take this lawsuit forward, and what it means? And then ultimately we'll get to this, but what we can do to help.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I've been a community activist for well over 20 years. It was all about resiliency and sustainability, and not the United Nations version. It's the local mom and pop version. And just, if I'm going to make a better world, start in your own backyard. That's what I've been living and breathing for decades now. And so this last winter, however, was so ridiculously intense with all the snow load, and over the course of the last couple decades, and I'm in my own hometown since I was 4 years old. We've seen the weather change. The snow has changed. It's much heavier and much more, much wetter content, which makes it much more disastrous, right? Because rooftops fall in and trees fall over and things are breaking and snapping, and so it's just and we had 60 feet of snow up in Tahoe, to the point where the ski runs were closed because the ski lifts were buried. They've just really never experienced that. But we had a lot of extraordinary tree damage, which is happening around the country. The trees, we know, are very high with aluminum because we've had the bark actually tested. And we know that what's happening, as Dane Wigington from Geoengineering Watch talks about, is that the plants, the trees, even the produce, they're not absorbing they're not uptaking the water and the nutrients and the sugars and so on. And so they're essentially starving to death. So when you walk into our conifer forests, you used to get that beautiful aroma, that scent, and you don't any longer, because the trees aren't breathing and absorbing and they're not expelling. So, and what's happening is the trees may look fine, like these ponderosas look fine, and all of a sudden you see the needles turning very brown, and in 5 days are completely dead. Well, they were dying a slow death. So the level of destruction from the trees alone, people were buried in their homes for weeks. No electricity, couldn't even get to them. There's so many thousands of trees downed along the roads. They brought in fire crews for the first time to cut it up, the trees to reach people. And I had a tree fall on my house here, just skinned my house, hit the deck. And then at my partner's house, 2:30 in the morning, we heard that iconic crashing sound. We knew a tree was falling, and that's when you hold your breath. And the storm had already passed. But we heard it, and then we just got hit. It was like a train hitting. It was a big house, and the train just shook. And my partner's like, "What was that?" I'm like, "I think we just got hit." And thousands of dollars of damage, but it could have been far worse. But it's a natural state. And we are now continuing to do a lot of water tests for rainwater and snow. I know Geoengineering Watch did a $1 million test behind those trails left behind the planes that actually went right behind, got FAA approval, and actually collected the air samples. And what we're finding in all these water and rain samples and snow samples and so on is it's very high, extraordinarily high in aluminum, barium, strontium, cobalt, lead, zinc. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And this is not natural. Our rain should not be full of this at all. And the ones who are really suffering the most are the children. Their bodies and their minds are developing. So it's bad for us, but it's much worse for them. Now, I know people don't think this exists, but you have to understand it was in the Vietnam War, actually during the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where they were doing a lot of cloud seeding and weather manipulation to just drown out the supply chain there along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they did it. They did a great job. It also affected our men and women. They were just getting, foot rot and so on. They were so wet. But after that, what happened is it led to a global ban of weather manipulation and warfare during a time of war, but not during a time of peace. And so this has been continuing on. And while people think that geoengineering doesn't exist, first of all, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of patents. There are annual reports that the power companies who will do a lot of the rain seeding and the weather manipulation for more rain for hydroelectricity. We even have corporate companies that you can hire, and they will actually manipulate the weather to ensure that for your wedding day, there's no rain. We also have research organizations. They can spray whatever they want. They can spray lithium, which they do, which makes people very tired and passive. I could go out there and spray whatever I want over the people's heads, as long as I'm saying it's for research. And the reason why, and also there's NOAA has a gag order on our weather forecasters. They cannot talk about weather modification in their forecasts. So some of them have in the past. They've slipped out saying, "Oh, this is chaff right here, and this is a bunch of aluminum, and that's for the military, who they use that and they spray the aluminum because it's better for their, the radar, and it's better for their satellites." And never mind that it's ubiquitous in our world now. Aluminum is in everything, and inhalation is far worse than ingestion, though ingestion is not good. And so the perpetrators, and the biggest perpetrator is the military. They don't want to tell you or admit that they're doing it, because once they admit to it, they have a responsibility to it. So they just pretend it doesn't exist, and they gaslight you, tell you you're a conspiracy theorist, and so on. But in the last few years since COVID hit, it's become so egregious. It is so blatant that people who 2, 3, 5 years ago thought this was a conspiracy are like, "Oh my gosh, they're spraying us again." And so it's they call it solar dimming, aerial spraying. I know Bill Gates is really big into climate change is happening, so we've got to dim the sun. Well, first of all, No one's ever tested that. There's been no EIRs on what happens when you reduce the sun's exposure on the planet, which we know is not good for photosynthesis, not good for our vitamin D absorption at the very least. And what's funny is that they're saying they're going to do it, but they've been doing it for years and years and years. They're just now telling you they're doing it, so that way, you know, they're not considered doing something illegal. So it's horrific. And interestingly enough, I've been saying to my legal team that this will be probably one of the first cases where the whole legal team, the judge, the bailiff, the court recorder are actually victims of the very crime that's being tried. There's nobody in this country that has escaped this crime. Nobody, not one living thing. And so what I've done is I reached out to somebody I'd met last year, Dina Pollard-Sachs, who's a constitutional professor of 25 years. She has, she's got license to go take cases all the way to the Supreme Court. She's not really a litigator. Her husband is. And she's also an expert on, constitutionality. So I reached out to her saying, look, I don't know the best, and we're going to need the best here. So we now have the best evidentiary attorney out there who actually writes the books on it for law schools. We have one of the best environmental attorneys, constitutional attorneys, military JAG attorneys we're talking to. And I have to tell you, Kathleen, when they see the water samples alone, or when they watch the show called The Dimming from Geoengineering Watch, and Geoengineering Watch is not part of this lawsuit, and we have not filed yet. We're getting to that point. When they see the evidence, they're gobsmacked. They just can't believe that such an egregious, atrocious crime has been committed nearly every single day, to the extent that it has been, and it has not come to an end, has not been stopped. And so we know who the perpetrators are. I can't get into the details. We know who the biggest perpetrator is. We are finding the best avenue, right? Because they have some protections. And we're trying to find the best avenue to go in there, and we're also, by the way, willing to take this to the Supreme Court. So we're preparing this case with the intention of, more than likely, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And the other thing that's very important is that we do plan, once we do file, is to also ask for an injunction and stop it immediately, because a court case will probably take, especially if it goes to the Supreme Court, it'll take 4, 5, 6 years, for God's sake. We don't have that much time. So it's a national emergency. We're also going to be looking at, and we're speaking with some different experts on the topic of, if you ever saw the film, the movie called Dirty Waters.
I did not.
Well, basically, it was from DuPont and all the chemicals getting out and just poisoning a town and cows and so on. It was like they were producing Teflon, that product Teflon for frying pans. And so what they ultimately did is they had all the townspeople do blood samples. Like, they got thousands of people to take blood samples, and they could find the chemicals in their blood. Now, aluminum, which is by far the most thing they're spraying, by a long shot, lodges in the brain. You can't really see it in the bloodstream, but we are talking to certain doctors and so on, and reaching out to find out what's the best labs we can actually try to get people to start testing their blood. Maybe it's cobalt, strontium, barium, lithium. I mean, like, what is it that we can find in the blood? And then we're going to be doing affidavits, and we're going to be basically using blood as the biggest evidence, and maybe even hair samples. And then we're going to be asking for the injunction, because this is a national emergency.
Well, it isn't. Let me ask you, Reinette, who will you sue?
We don't want to speak to that right this second,
okay.
But it's the biggest perpetrator of all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think I know who that is. So we'll leave that to be the question.
And as you can imagine, it's going to take a really good legal team to deal with them, because they're a beast.
It's very rarely that we see anyone taking action. Truly taking action. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you are taking this on just speaks extremely highly about who you are, and also the gravity of the situation, because there probably isn't a sky in this country or in Canada. And I have seen videos and films in the Netherlands. I've seen it in Finland, Australia. It appears to be a global assault. I was listening to Peggy Hall's presentation a while back, and she showed the website the corporations who are doing the cloud seeding.
Right.
And it showed where these assaults were happening. And of course, it showed your neck of the woods. And it was right at the time when all the heavy snowfall was hitting you. So if anyone is wanting to find some actual data, then go to Peggy Hall's site, and she has a number of interviews that she's done and presentations, and it actually will give you some of the sites and the links so people who are listening to this, don't take our word for it. Actually take a look at industries' sites where they're actually showing where they're making their money. I also wanted to make it clear that we're seeing that happening in New Mexico, where I am. And there are corporations out of Colorado who have come in 2 consecutive years, approaching our governor and supposedly taking it to the public. But they have given a very short, a truncated window of time to respond, and it must be done through USPS. So it's not even an email process. And how many times are we forced to go through the U.S. Postal Service to make our statements to issues like any of these things? Right. So it's always they show their hand. They show the duplicitous nature of their attacks, and we now see very clearly what this is about. It's about poisoning us from the air. It's about creating droughts. It's about creating floods. It's about what you were describing with these trees. They had plenty of water, but they were dying of drought.
That's right. I've had people last year, for instance, were saying, well, it's drought, it's drought. I'm like, no, it's not, because we're in our beautiful, beloved Yuba River. And right there along the banks, we have huge ponderosas and maples and oaks, and they're dying. Yes. Next to a flowing river. So it's like, this has nothing to do with the drought. They're just not able to uptake the water. And so to let people know, it's, there's a document that's decades old that says Air Force, basically controlling the weather by 2025. We're almost there. And the weather, we don't have weather forecasting anymore. We have weather scheduling, and it is highly, highly manipulated. And if people don't understand that heating up the ionosphere, which is what this is part of the process, and the HAARP, HAARP does that, it's really easy to manipulate weather. It's easy to block certain fronts coming in. It's easy to expand and intensify certain storms and hurricanes. It's also, you also can steer it away too. So we know it's possible. You can steer it into things, and you can steer it away. And so, this is 5th generation warfare. And people don't like thinking about that, but it's like, you're not going to see the kinetic warfare, which are the tanks and the, bombs and so on. It's a silent war. And I have people saying our government would never do that. Our agencies would never do that. The military would never do that. And it goes on. And I'm like, you're right. Our government and military, they would not do that, but they've been co-opted. And they were co-opted a long time ago. And now they have running them people who have obviously taken an oath to something different than this nation and this constitution, and so, or their office. And so it's a silent war, and they continue to gaslight us to keep us believing, the major population, that it's just not happening. It's just commercial flights and blah blah blah. Because once people know, we're going to demand they stop or test it or whatever, and they don't want that. So it's a massive gaslighting campaign, which is also very common. So so what we're seeing is weather manipulation, the drying out of the forest, as well as the intensity of the fires. The fires are no longer natural because everything is coated in aluminum, and which makes it much hotter fires, much more difficult to control. And then, of course, we have, the extremes. It's weather whiplash. It's not just like a normal little rain or a snow. It's one extreme, either very, very dry or very, very wet. And the snow is so much heavier that's actually I used to love it when it snowed. Now I'm like, no, because I know like my yard right now is wrapped up with bandages and, poles trying to hold up all the branches, because whenever we have snow, it's no longer this beautiful, lovely thing. It's like, oh, it's going to wreck everything. And that's because there's snows, and there's chemicals in the snow. It's actually pesticide. And so it's really, it's not what people think. And so I hear people talk about climate change, how we have to deal with climate change. I'm like, no, first and foremost, we have to stop the geoengineering and weather manipulation programs. Once we finish those and stop them, then you can tell me what if climate change exists or not, because you cannot differentiate from one or the other, right? And so climate change is nothing to me to even discuss at this point in time until we bring geoengineering to a complete end. And then let's see what happens with Mother Nature, because she does know how to go back to balance pretty fast.
Well, yes, and who is perpetrating or who is promoting climate change? If you
Right.
look at the mainstream media, and they're the ones that are promoting that, and we have to take a look at who owns and runs mainstream media. It's the same who runs Hollywood. It's the same who runs our governments. It's the same who runs education. It's the same who run the legal system. And so it all boils down to the same puppeteers who are making certain that their narrative goes forward, but it's not the voice of the people. It's not the voice of the people like yourself or myself or those who are aware and look up and actually see what we see in our environment. I also wanted to bring out the point that what you were talking about was, the fires that burn so hot these days. And I've been following the fires in California and seeing melted vehicles and where trees still are standing, but everything down to the foundation of a home is all gone. The fires have burned so hotly, and you have to realize that all these chemicals that you listed, they're heavy metals,
Right?
and those heavy metals put a layering on everything, and they incinerate very hotly.
So I went to Paradise after it happened. We're not too far, about 60 miles as the crow flies. And I was on the city council at the time, and I went through there, and I spent a lot of time after Hurricane Katrina, and it reminded me of Hurricane Katrina, but it was just charred, but it was just that kind of level of destruction. It was just horrific. And I heard a lot of firsthand stories, people who went there to do rescue afterwards, and it was horrific. It was much worse than they ever let us know. There's many more people who died than they reported, for sure. But no, this is, as I said, it looks to me like, the powers that be want us all cloistered in little, 15-minute cities, not in the rural areas. It's too dangerous. It's too dry, whatever, the different excuses. And so there's that part. And then you also have, the weather manipulation, where you can just eradicate a whole entire state and just wipe them out, or a city quickly. We see that happening with these massive floods. They'll just spring up out of just out of nowhere. But then the other thing that's happening too is we're seeing it is very, very alarming, is because of the aluminum, these heavy metals, it does a real number on your memory. So we now have people in their 20s and 30s who are having serious memory issues. Like, they'll say, I'm having memory issues, and they'll be talking and they'll ask the same question 3 times in a row. And they're in their 20s or early 30s. They're not in the 70s or 80s where you'd expect this. And so it seems to me they want to shorten our lifespans. B, make sure our health is so compromised we're always, hooked up to, big pharma. And the third is that C is that they're really doing a number on our brains to make us into mush, so we just don't have memory worth anything. And so it's very diabolical. And so on April 19th, and I didn't know this, but that was actually the anniversary of the day the shot was heard around the world, which started the American Revolution. I had no idea. Somebody had pointed that out who donated, but I went on to Give, Send, Go and started fundraising to pay the legal team, to pay the researchers, to do, to make sure that we've got the best thing going, and that we can take this all the way to the Supreme Court, because we know we're going to be fought like crazy. And so we're doing the Give, Send, Go, and it goes into a place called Lord Advocates, which is a 501c3. So it's tax deductible. And I have what's called Gen 7, it's about Generation 7, or the 7th generation, which is every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now. It's a really good measurement for us as leaders in our decision making. So Gen 7 is a pending 501c3 right now. And once we get our tax status, then tax exempt status, then people will start making donations to Gen 7. And I do want to make this very, very clear. Fortunately, I have a very simple life, but I'm making sure that I don't get paid a penny for doing this work. Other people are getting paid. There's other volunteers. We have a whole assortment, but to make it very, very clear, this money goes into the legal fund. It goes towards legal expenses, even like testing rainwater, public outreach education as well, because we need people to be aware of this, so we have all eyes on the court case and they can feel the pressure. But I want to make it very clear, I've been calling out a lot of perpetrators in the last year in the medical freedom movement and even the patriot movement, and it's really saddened me actually that these individuals have become so misdirected. But I want to make it very clear that I have enough little passive income that I can stay afloat and just dedicate myself to this. So I'm not profiting from this at all. And I never will. So I just will make that clear, because I've been very sad to see what's developed over the last couple of years.
Right. And well, people have reason to be, to wonder,
Yeah.
because we have been exposed to so much duplicity, so much criminality. I mean, we look at Enron back a number of years ago. We look at the whole mortgage fraud. I mean, we look at all of the attempts to, to steal from us, from hardworking people. So thank you for bringing that forward and making that clear. And I'll put all those links below in this interview so that people can go to those and make their donations and stay abreast of what's happening with this lawsuit.
And if there's anybody who does not want to go through Give, Send, Go, you could also send it to me, REINETTE SENUM, and the PO Box 1972, Nevada City, California. And that's 95959. You can send it there. Write Gen 7 GEN, capital GEN, then capital SEVEN 7. It's all one word. And you can go that route as well. And I have to say, as Dina Pollard Sachs, who's been helping bring the legal team together and the researchers, this might be the most important case ever. And she said, we're not building a case, we're building a revolution. And because there's never been a larger crime than this crime. And as you said, everyone's been so busy looking down, they're not looking up. And we have people now in their 20s, mid-20s, who've actually never seen a natural sky, like, that's not adulterated. And we now have 12 different classifications of man-made clouds. 12
Wow.
different, because they're man-made. And so the younger generation have been so immersed in this false reality, this sky, that they actually think that when they look up and see the streaks in the air, they think that's been like that forever, and it hasn't been. And so, and there's also a massive indoctrination campaign going on right now, Kathleen. I had someone from Southern California who's a teacher said they were doing their state exams, and within there, they're talking about weather manipulation and cloud seeding, and they're admitting to it happening, right? Indoctrinating them and normalizing it. And then the next day, they had a written exam where they had to write about a big weather event. And so, they're just making it seem normal for the young people that we've always manipulated the weather, or we've always had these really weird extreme events out of nowhere. And this is the type of indoctrination that's been going on. So instead of, allowing them to become adults and question the reality, they're going to get them at a young age and they're going to normalize it. It's disgusting.
Well, that's the best and most effective way, is always go after the children.
I know.
And we know how much manipulation there's been in the education system, the dumbing down of America. We've been reading about that since the 70s, when the books began to appear by those who were astute and saw what was going on. And they have been happening ever since. So we know we just take our children and we normalize. And I think that's probably the most deceitful way of manipulation. Now, I remember as a child, my brother and I was born and raised in Alberta, and the big open prairies and huge skies, like in Montana and Wyoming and other states. And we used to lie down in the backyard in the grass and look up at those beautiful cumulus clouds for hours and watch them change their forms. But they were real clouds. And so when I first began seeing the fake cloud formations, I could tell, because I had spent time in nature. And how many people actually spend time in nature? And then, of course, like you're talking about, the 20-year-olds and younger, they don't have a natural environment to spend time in. So they have no understanding of what natural means any longer. It's all been augmented.
And if you're not exposed to it, you don't know to fight for it, right? To try to save it if you're not exposed to it and appreciate it. And I too, as a child, not far from here, I used to sail with my little dog Pepper and my little Guppy D sailboat. And all I did was sail and look at the skies. And I say to people, never ever once in that decade of me sailing growing up, did I look in the sky and see these kind of streaks that just, stay all day long and then expand until finally the sun is blocked out. And there are times where we do not see the sun for a few weeks at all. And it's very oppressive. It does a real mental job too on your mental state.
Yes.
People feel like they're sitting ducks. They feel completely helpless. They feel like there's nothing they can do. And I was feeling that way too. And what's happened recently is that the bird population, I know it's not just the geoengineering, we've also got the 5G, we also have all the the glyphosates and so on, we have all these chemicals. But I used to have these beautiful, I guess it was finches, but they're tanagers that were coming through, and this time of year they come and eat the little seeds dangling off of the birch trees, and I get 50 of them generally, just beautiful. And last year was 2, and this year there's none. And even my hummingbirds they're gone. My hummingbirds are gone. Yeah. And so some pockets are still kind of okay, but other pockets are getting slammed. And so I've just seen just a terrible drop off in the wildlife and bird population just in the last few years, 2-3 years. And so when the hummingbirds disappeared, that was my final straw. I'm like, no, we're not doing this.
Well,
and
you talked about how susceptible the children are and the infants, but also our animals are not just our wild animals, but our domesticated animals.
Everything.
They're walking on this earth.
There's nobody in this country, and many countries around the world, there's nobody in this nation who's not a victim to this. There's nothing living on in America that's not a victim to this. Yeah. That's why I say this is going to be one of the biggest cases ever, because there's never been so many victims. It's everything. It's that big.
So REINETTE, tell us how we can specifically take action, so the people who are listening to this today, just maybe give a point by point of what to do based upon where you are in your own process. Fantastic. So that we can get people behind you, because a good legal team and yourself is not the voice of America.
No, so
we need the voice of America.
Thank you for asking. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We know that's the high-hanging fruit, but we also have a low-hanging fruit. Because I ran for governor in California last year with no party affiliation, I had a most excellent campaign team, very effective, small, efficient, really good with social media outreach and education, on the ground crews. We had people with banners over overpasses and intersections, and it was fantastic. So what we're doing is as we build this case, we have to put the pressure on and reach critical mass in America. And it might be a class action lawsuit. It might be an international, where we actually bring other nations in, right? We're looking at our best moves. But what we're going to be doing is educating people a couple different ways. One is going out there and just dropping the banners over the overpasses, just like look up, right? Or if it's like really, really a bad day, we have people, we're like, okay, you guys will have a ground crew when it's like a really bad spray day. You're like, hey guys, let's meet at the bridge in an hour. And you go out there and you're like, look up, you're being sprayed. But we also then have where we're putting our elected officials, the Air and Water Quality Board, on notice. And what we're doing is we're going to be giving them all the information they need, the facts, the data, and so on, scientific data, and giving it to our elected officials and a representative saying, here's the data. You've taken an oath of office. You have a duty to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic. You've got to protect us. That's your job. And if they do not reply, if they do not respond, then we can go for the notice of liability. And what we do is, people think that they're protected when they're on a board, or when they're on an agency, or they're elected. Well, you're protected in that position until you've committed a crime. And then when you've committed a crime, you are personally liable at that point in time. So what we're doing with the notice of liabilities is it goes around that protection, saying, okay, you, Mr. Board Member, you are committing these crimes. You're not stopping these crimes. Therefore, you're part of the crimes. And what we're going to do is we're going to sidestep and go around doing a notice of liability and go after you and your assets personally. And so the objective is to, so we've got the public outreach education, we've got the putting our elected officials and representatives on notice. And then the next thing is also having people, once we figure out what's the best way, where there are labs, we have people already doing the water and snow analysis. And that's with the chain of custody as well. So people, it'll hold up in court. And as I said, we've got one of the best evidentiary attorneys and experts out there to make sure whatever we put in will withhold, being thrown out from court. And so the objective then is to tell people once we're ready is to get their blood tested, their hair sample, and we'll tell you where to go and exactly what it is you're testing for. And affidavits also, so that could become like, an affidavit, which is basically,
so it doesn't have to just be the state of California.
Oh, no, this is nationwide. This
is all across the country. Okay. All right.
It has to be too, because the other thing is too, is that it might be something international, which would be even more powerful. But again, we have to really figure that out. But, because it's spraying, it doesn't stop at the boundaries, right, of states or nations. And so it's impacting it's impacting Mexico, it's impacting Canada, it's impacting everybody. I mean, these are, they get caught up in the trade winds and our rain cycle and evaporation, and it's raining down these chemicals as well.
So it's a possibility that this could even become a class action lawsuit worldwide.
Possibly.
Certainly the North American continent.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and we have to, again, the objective is to really identify the best avenue that will withhold, right, will stand up in even Supreme Court, right? So we have to make sure that it's as solid can be, and that's why we have a team of people looking at it from all different angles. Again, we know who the perpetrators are, and we're going to go after them, but we have to figure out, okay, what's the best, and also what's former past precedents and so on. I mean, we would rather not have to go out there and break a new trail, use some kind of good former case precedents and go that direction, but we'll do whatever it takes.
Wow. And are you working with Dr. Nick Baggage on this as well?
I am not, but we have not. I have Nikki Florio, who's a bit of a pollinator 5G geoengineering expert, and she's very well connected to so many individuals, including Nick. So we're reaching out to all of them. The beautiful thing is this, Kathleen, is that we have lab results, and we're gonna get even more, right, from water and soil and snow. We have the whistleblowers, we have the patents, we have the annual reporting, we have the biologists. It's not like we have to go out there and actually make it happen. It's just we have to collect it.
Yes.
And we have to reach out to the people. The experts are also out there too. So the beautiful thing is there's such a plethora of overwhelming information. Again, these attorneys who are looking at this, their mouths are dropping. They're like, how can this be legal? How can this be happening? And it's so egregious, like in your face. And we're like, we know. So when you have attorneys looking at this from that perspective, through that lens, that tells you something.
Well, it tells us that they have had their eyes closed, and that you're helping to educate them.
Yeah.
And that is going to perhaps separate the wheat from the chaff, even in the Bar Association. And it's going to perhaps put a bit of a schism, which we could hope for, because the courts are corporate courts listed on Dun & Bradstreet, doing business for profit. Right. And the attorneys are, or the judges in those courts are bar attorneys.
Right.
And they all swear to the same bar association.
Right.
So this is an opportunity to perhaps light a few sticks of dynamite in that so-called legal structure, by taking this issue and getting the country, maybe North America, maybe the world, behind it, and really going, okay, let's open up the fraud, let's open up the assault, let's expose this, because we are demanding our right to be healthy, our right to be safe. We're demanding our constitutionally secured rights, our Bill of Rights, to live safely and healthy on our own property, on this land. We were born to be free, born to be safe. And we are living at a time when we are being warred upon from the skies. just one way of being warred upon. And so I really appreciate and thank you for what you're doing. And let's, as you get going on this, let's do another interview.
Please, yes, I'd love, because I want to inform people. Then we'll have what we'll also have is we'll have best practices, best steps, templates, scripts for people. So they want to call people, the air water quality boards and so on. When they want to send a letter in, we'll have the templates. So we're really going to have everything laid out.
Okay.
In fact, if you go to Gen7, GENSEVEN, gen7.org, you'll see Save Our Skies, SOS, Save Our Skies tab on the top. We just have the one pager right there that goes to the Give, Send, Go, but that is where we'll have a lot of the information and updates. And so, no, I think what's happening with the attorneys when they're looking at this is they realize that they're a victim of the crime as well. And so even when we go to the judges, it's like, this is not just about us. You too are a victim. Your grandchildren are a victim of this crime. It's that bad. It's that big and egregious. And so I think that's what's happening is these attorneys are just shocked. But again, you're right. The bar association. It's a bar attorneys and judges. That's why we're also taking the notice of liability route too. We're like, we, the people, we're going to sidestep that and go to you and make you personally liable. Because I tell people, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Do not. And we're not going to either. That's our tactic.
Well, that's very good. And so, yes, do let me know when you're taking the next step and we can do another interview. And so what are you suggesting, going to gen7.org and make a donation? Is there anything else at this point, or are we waiting?
Well, there's that. I'm on Substack. It's REINETTE Senum's Foghorn Express. .substack.com. I'll do updates there as well and interviews and so on. REINETTE Senum's foghornexpress.com. .substack.com. That would be the best thing. We're going to be doing that, and then we're going to be out a lot on social media and so on, and educating people big time. So
very, very good. And Sigmund Freud, or excuse me, not Sigmund Freud, but his counter to that, Carl Jung, said that when we separated ourselves from nature, that was when we really first started to lose our own connection to ourself.
Right.
And so we take a look today, and here we are, less aware of nature and her bounty. And of course, it's time for us now in this spiritual war against us and this physical war to reconnect with our own spiritual selves. And by doing that, we can look to nature, we can look up in the sky, and we can begin to start to take a look at what is real and what is perpetrated as false, and begin to learn how to be discerning. And I think discernment is one of our most important keys to living a good life. And so as we discern what is real and what is not in our skies, we become educated just by merely looking into the sky.
Right. Observation.
Yes.
No, we're going to be spending the rest of our lives and quite a few generations restoring and reclaiming and healing the planet. And we will be building economies based upon that. And that's a good thing. If we can build economies based upon warring and raping the planet, we can certainly build economies upon healing it. And that's what our future is going to hold, or we're not going to have a future at all. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Well, that's a fine summary of that too. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we?
No, I would just say spread the word. If anybody out there knows podcasters, publications, interviewers, radio show hosts, we're really just trying to get the word out there. We know this will run us in millions and millions of dollars, even with people volunteering. But we've got a long haul. We're just trying to get the word out there and start that critical mass going right now. So even if you don't have money to contribute, I totally understand. But there's other ways to support this endeavor, and everything is highly, highly appreciated.
Very fine. Well, REINETTE Senum, thank you so much for all you're doing, and I'm behind you, and let us all get behind you.
I know, I feel it, and thank you. It's my honor, Kathleen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.